Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Ins and Outs of Work.
I'm Nelly, aka the HR Insider.
And I'm Joe, the HR Outsider. And in today's episode, we talk employee engagement. What does that really mean? A few awesome did you knows, and the infamous Outsider Outpouring. Finally, of course, some myths to debunk in today's episode.
Yes, and there's going to be a lot of information in this episode. So, if you'd like to read up on any of the points we make today, check the show notes wherever you're listening to this podcast for all the links. Now, before we dive in, you know it, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, share this episode with a friend, and leave a review.
Happy listening!
Yes, Joe, so already we're nearing the end of our Fundamentals Freshening Up series.
Yes. This journey through the whole employee lifecycle, it's been a wild adventure so far, Nearly.
It has, and it's taking us through the summer of 2021, isn't it, Joe?
It is. The summer's been great.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to the definition part of our episode.
Definition.
Employee engagement is the emotional attachment employees feel towards their place of work, job role, position within the company, colleagues and culture, and the effect this attachment has on their well-being and productivity.
Yes, and a guy called Kevin Kruse, who's a New York Times best-selling author, put it this way, Nearly. Put simply, employee engagement is the emotional commitment the employee has to the organization and its goals.
Very well put, I think, Joe.
Well put, Kevin. Good on you, Kevin.
Absolutely. Now, on to our Did You Knows. So in this part, we share a few, hopefully for you, interesting Did You Knows about the topic that we discuss.
Yes, and once again, Nearly, this is a bit of a quick history one.
Joe, did you know? Here's a story that's often cited as an example of employee engagement, but that apparently is untrue. President John F. Kennedy's first visit to NASA's headquarters back in 1961. During his visit to the NASA Space Center, as the story goes, President John F. Kennedy noticed a janitor carrying a broom. He interrupted his tour, walked over to the man and asked, "What are you doing?" "Well, Mr. President," the janitor responded, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon."
Wow.
Yeah.
How's that for employee engagement?
I know. I so wish the story were true, Joe.
Same. It's a great story nonetheless.
Absolutely. Second, did you know here, Joe? Before around 1990, the discourse was really about employee satisfaction. How much do I like things here?
And then really, if we talk about the evolution of that, so a guy by the name of William A. Kahn wrote an article in 1990 in what's called the Academy of Management Journal describing employee engagement and disengagement. So the real innovation that this guy Kahn brought was a sense of investigating and giving a name to the mysterious reason nearly behind why people engage at work.
Yes, Joe, and here's what the idea proposed. Engaged employees come to work as their preferred selves, which means they bring their full talents and efforts to their jobs. Disengaged employees, meanwhile, defend their preferred selves from their work.
Okay, Nearly. Well, that was the definitions. Now it's time for a little segment we call the Outsider Outpouring, where I, the HR Outsider, take 30 seconds to go on a bit of a rant about this topic. So we're going to start the clock. Here we go. Start it now. So I've always loved the saying, find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life, Nearly. It's a great saying. Work is just better when you're engaged in it, when you're passionate about it, when you love it. But from a manager's point of view, I get to be a manager these days, and engagement is something that you can't force. You can't push it on people. You can't drive it. What I think you can do, though, is create the right conditions for it to happen. And actually, what I'm realizing more and more is it goes all the way back to the beginning of the employee life cycle and that hiring process. Hiring the right people is so crucial to getting that employee engagement right. Because if you hire the wrong people who aren't passionate about what they're doing, you're off to a very bad start. That's my outpouring for today.
Awesome outpouring once again, Joe. We are onto our myths. So in this part of our episode, we talk about a few stereotypes about the topic and then we debunk them. First myth for you here, Joe, is that most of your workforce is disengaged. Surprisingly, this is not true.
It's a myth.
I did not know that.
You thought it was true.
I did. I did. So here's why. In researching their book, The Employee Experience, authors Tracy Malett and Matthew Wright found that 32% of employees globally are fully engaged. These are called the enthusiastic champions. 48% are key contributors. They are called the strong and steady. This means, Joe, that 20% of employees are either disengaged or situationally engaged. And that means that they may or not be engaged depending on the situation or the moment. In other words, things are not as bad as they might seem in terms of employee engagement.
Not so bad.
No. Second myth here for you, Joe. An employee engagement survey creates engagement. This is not correct.
No.
Measuring engagement is similar to measuring one's blood pressure. It's important. It is key in understanding overall health. However, in itself, it doesn't create health.
So true, Neely. I think sometimes we look at that like, if we just do a survey, it'll get better. But no, you have to do something with the survey afterwards.
Yeah, this reminds me of an episode we had in our first season of The Ins and Outs of Work, Joe, with Rebecca Wetterman from Valera. And she literally said, let's face it, Neely, employee surveys stink.
Yes, that was one of the best quotes of season 1. Go back and check that out. I think it's episode 8 of season 1. Okay. Final myth though, third and final myth for today is this one. We can perk our way to engagement. No, we can't. The myth is that you can provide a bunch of perks, a bunch of, additional things to employees, little perks, and then you'll get more engaged workplace. No, it doesn't really work like that. Why? Because psychological research says that when someone jumps to a high level of income or a new standard of living or has a new perk, they quickly adapt and become dissatisfied again. So if you try to buy employee satisfaction by upgrading perks, the price always goes up. There's got to be something more to it than that. Give employees a bonus and that becomes part of next year's expectations. So it's really about going beyond perks.
Yeah. And as you said, this starts at the hiring process, Joe. Let's get started with some serious insider action. So in this part of the episode, I, the HR insider, gets to share some actionable tips that hopefully you can use right away. And today they will be about measuring engagement. And there's going to be 5 best practices, Joe.
5 best practices.
You ready?
Ready.
First, measuring the right thing. This is really back to basics, of course, but it makes a lot of sense because the term engagement is used for many different things. They all relate to some state of well-being, but an engaged worker is not necessarily a happy worker, and a happy worker is not necessarily an empowered worker.
They're all different things.
Yes, and different companies measure different things. And even when 2 companies have the same engagement score, workers may feel very, very differently. So, the first best practice is therefore measure the right thing.
It's simple, but it needs to be said.
Absolutely. Number 2, use proven methods. Now, Joe, 2 of the best known questionnaires are the Utrecht Work Engagement Scale, of which there also exists an ultra short 3-item version, and the Gallup scale. Other scales do exist, but they are less tested. And the risk when you use a less tested scale is that your engagement survey is virtually worthless. So the best practice here is use proven measurement methods. Number 3, very important one as well, confidential, not anonymous. Now, measuring employee engagement should have a business reason, and we will see this later on when we talk about our awesome example of today. But a common mistake is guaranteeing the anonymity of data. That means that you can never use the data for further analysis and, by extension, for the business. So the third employee engagement best practice is guarantee confidentiality, not anonymity, Joe. I did not know that.
Very good point, Neely, because I imagine you can't do so much with it if you have that anonymity built in.
Exactly. It's useless. Number 4, using your data for value-added analysis. It's nice to know, of course, that you've achieved a 7% increase in engagement since last year. But what does that really mean for the business? You can use the data to measure how engaged workers impact business outcomes. Now, here's a really cool example, I think. At Best Buy, a 1% increase in engagement led to a $100,000 growth in revenue per store. Now, here you see really nicely the impact of employee engagement going up on the business results going up. Awesome. Number 5 and the last one, Joe, what's in it for the employee? Filling in surveys is usually not people's favorite way to pass time. So what can you give your colleagues to inspire them to fill in a survey? You can give them insight into their own results, because that's fundamental in helping them understand the importance of the survey. So that really, I think, is the basis here. And then you can also promise them a customized report with tips on their current situation. That might be very helpful for them.
Very helpful. Thank you very much, Neely, for those 5 brilliant best practices in employee engagement. That was fantastic. And reminder, if you did want to dive into any of those in more detail, please do check out the show notes for the link to read up on any of those. We're going to go through to our next segment, final segment of today's short and snappy episode, and we talk about a story or an example where we bring all of this to life in a company doing something really innovative in this space of employee engagement. So today is another small company, possibly the gateway to the internet. I think they do a search engine, Google.
Nice.
Heard of them, yep. So Google and many other Silicon Valley giants are pretty famous for their employee perks, pretty famous for the things that they provide in their office and to their employees, gyms, free lunches, in-house massages nearly. I could go one of those right now.
Yes.
Oh, yes. They are nice, but they don't always impact employee engagement. We learned about that in one of the myths in part 1. Freedom and trust are better. Empowerment is better. And Google have done this so well, especially when it comes to how they allow employees to use their time. So really it all comes down, and the example that we want to bring today is the fact that Google has put in place since 2004 a program called the 20% program. So in 2004, Google founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin, they put together this program where essentially they designed it to give employees 1 full day per week, that's 20% of their time, to work on a Google-related passion project of their own choosing or creation.
That is a lot of time, Joe.
That is a lot of time. But the most impressive thing about this, Neely, is that it's actually given birth to some of Google's most amazing services and most profitable services. So we talk about AdSense, Gmail, Google Maps. This 20% program has given life to those things.
That's awesome.
Phenomenal, right?
That's awesome. And I think this is a great example, Joe, of how you see that when people are super engaged in your organization, that leads to incredible projects such as, in this case, Gmail and Google Maps. And these, of course, will then have a tremendous impact on your business.
Yes. And you talked about measurement. So here we've been trying to talk about how to increase employee engagement and how to measure it. What better way to measure it than by showing that it actually really impacts the bottom line of the business? Google put into place this 20% program. They can actually show that these services like Gmail were created out of this. That proves employee engagement adds to the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Amazing. So to sum up what we love about this example, first of all, we love the autonomy and flexibility. We love the empowerment, the sense that Google trusts its employees and empowers them to do a great job and bring their valuable insight to the job. In summary, it really brings to mind a quote from another huge gun of the tech sphere, Steve Jobs. He's not Google, he's Apple, obviously. But something he once said was, "It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and then tell them what to do."
Wise words to end this episode with, Joe, I think.
There you go. Great example.
Awesome example.
Yes.
We are off for today's episode, and we will be back last week with already our last part of our Fundamentals Brush Up series for this summer, Joe. I can't believe how fast that went by.
Yes. So we are finishing off our journey through the whole employee life cycle this summer by talking about remote offboarding, how to do it right in 2021. Really looking forward to that season finale.
Me too.
Yes. We'll see you next week.
Bye.